friends, before Jeorgina gives the opening verse in prayer, I want to gather on earth as in the heavens the representatives in spirit of the nations that gathered here in 1944 that produced the Bretton Woods Accord, 20th century Bretton Woods Accord. We're here today to offer up the 21st century, the first 21st century Bretton Woods Accord. So I want to read the nations so that they're with us in spirit. There will be representatives be joining us for the plenum at 3 o'clock, as I think we can all appreciate. They have busy schedules. So that's a time frame where we emphasize their participation, but they're welcome to join at any time. So I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to pause, and then I'm going to read the names of the nations. And I'm going to invite Jeorgina, whenever she's ready, to offer the opening prayer and song. So the nations are Australia, Belgium, Bolivia, Brazil, British Raj, today India, Canada, Chile, China, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, El Salvador, Ethiopia, France, Greece, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Iceland, Iran, Iraq, Liberia, Luxembourg, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Norway, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, the Philippines, Poland, South Africa, the Soviet Union, United Kingdom, United States, Uruguay, Venezuela, Yugoslavia. And I would add the three major Axis nations. The conference was held towards the conclusion of World War II, in spirit as well. Germany, Italy, and Japan. I pause here when Jeorgina is ready. Let us proceed. Thank you.
Kine sunasuna he. Mineha kine huni nasunaki. Neniha muinis bimni voltage kine hone nasunaki he. Mineha walaliok amagiju amaniju. Giju niju nasunaki. Kineho minihane. Mogo nasunaki he kineha. Neniho nasunaki. Walali nasunani he mineha. Father Creator, Great Spirit, gentle Earth Mother and your children, all our relations, grandmothers and grandfathers, old ones and ancient ones, the teachers, the healers, and the winged ones. We ask for your guidance today, and we ask that you be with us to guide our words, our voice, our strength, to bring the wisdom that is needed, to bring the hope and the prayers, to bring all that is needed to humanity at this time. Watch over us and guide us. Keep us safe in this time of pandemic. Keep us healthy and well and strong. And may the Great Dare watch over us as we walk our pathway. Keniha nasuna kihe mineha. Welaliok chineskum. Welaliok. 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 Kenine nasunine. Kine honi hani. Kenine na suninine. Kine honi hani. Mine hane. Kine soni. Mine nasuni. Nine. Kenine na suni nine. Kine honi hani. Mine hane. Kine soni. Mine nasuni. Nine. Kenine na suni nine. Kine honi hani. Mine hane. Kine soni. Mine nasuni. Nine. Kenine na suni nine. Kine honi hani. Mine hane. Kine soni. Mine nasuni. Nine. Kenine na suni nine. Kine honi hani. Kine honi hani. Kine honi hani. Kine honi hani. Neni sunasuna ni chiniskum. Welaliok, 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 welaliok nanihane. Nesunaki. Welaliok. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeorgina. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You have accompanied us over this last year. And so, friends, we are two or more that are gathered here on earth. Many, I believe, in the heavens that Jeorgina has invoked. So this is our third gathering here at Bretton Woods in the 75th anniversary commemoration year. Today we have a small and vital seed to plant in this granite soil here at the Mount Washington Hotel. That seed is in the form of what we're referring to as the first 21st century Bretton Woods Accord. The 20th century Bretton Woods Accord, or accords, were the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. With those two institutions, we globalized our debt-based monetary system. It was established 30 years prior with the passage of the Federal Reserve Act. Whether wittingly or otherwise, this was a result of the Federal Reserve Act and the Bretton Woods Accords. That is, the globalization of our debt-based monetary system. I don't need to tell folks that debt leads to poverty. Poverty leads to misery. Misery leads to struggle. struggle leads often to war, war to death, to ruin, and to despair. And so we have a seed to plant today. And I speak of it in terms of the redemption of our debt-based monetary system, with goodwill to all, but with clarity in terms of what's being asked. The centerpiece of today's summit, around which, beginning with Andrew and Connie, we will surround this seed with much wisdom and insight, is the Bretton Woods Concord Resolution. The Bretton Woods Concord Resolution, or the first 21st century Bretton Woods Accord, is the fruit, informal fruit, of the Bretton Woods Global Working Circle in Monetary Policy. This has been a circle, formal, informal, that's been gathering now for 7 years here. And the first fruit, first 21st century Bretton Woods Accord, is the Bretton Woods Concord Resolution, which endeavors to bring a redemptive impulse to our debt-based monetary system. So that's our work. And as the original Bretton Woods Conference began as an idea in the minds of a few people and expanded from there, so this inauguration of a new era in spirit, and I trust evermore to come into the earth, also begins small and modestly. We friends are witnesses, those on earth. As I've done every time I come here, I say to the Gold Room in Mount Washington Hotel, I offer up a prayer and meditation to those who were here in 1944. And the essence of that prayer is that I believe when we lift our wings and leave this earthly realm, we are granted a review of our life. Welcome, Bino. We are granted a review of our life when we lift our wings and leave the earth. And I'm referring to those who are with us, who were here in 1944. And in that review of our life, I believe we see all that we've done for good and for ill. And as we review and are granted this retrospect of our life, which many who have had near-death experiences recount, there grows in us a deep resolve to make good. We may have done things on earth that with a higher perspective we realize we're truly not in humanity's and our own best interests. And thus there arises a resolve deep in our spirits to make good. But these kindred spirits are on high, so they can't make good here on the earth unless they can connect with people here on the earth. We're striving to do that. And when such connections are made, then inspiration can occur. So that's what bears this impulse we bring today to inaugurate a new era with respect to the redemption of our debt-based monetary system. And so with that as a brief word of introduction, I introduce our first two speakers. And I am looking for I've been juggling here. I want to get the wording as accurately as possible. We have with us Andrew Cameron and Connie Baxter Marlowe. These are two friends of the work For many years, I've been telling a story that has to do with what they refer to as the three great syntheses. I won't say more because that's their story to tell, but that has been a central part of our work. And in this 400th anniversary year of the Pilgrims' arrival at Plymouth Rock, in the meeting with the original peoples of the land in the Plymouth area, the first synthesis arose. Connie and Andrew have been doing significant work, telling a story that really not many people want to hear, have the ears to hear. That's understandable. It's been a tragic history, but they stayed with it. They are the authors of the Trust Frequency, filmmakers, historians, and groundbreaking researchers of that original contact period. Their work, entitled The First 50 Years, tells the yet largely untold story. Connie herself is a descendant of two of the drafters of the first compact, the Mayflower Compact. And Andrew, who has come to lend a hand from overseas, has worked closely beside her in telling this story. So again, we begin small, modestly, but we have two or more who are gathered to witness this deed that we're going to do. Others will be joining us. It's early hour. But welcome, Connie, and welcome, Andrew. Take, if you will, about a half an hour to tell the story, and then we'll have some conversation. A heartfelt welcome.
Thank you, Stuart.
We're delighted to be here and to conclude this year-long effort that you have been making with the Bretton Woods initiative. And I'm Connie Baxter Marlowe, and this is Andrew Cameron Bailey. And Andrew is also author of The Mayflower Revelations, which is a historical novel that brings forth this first great synthesis we're speaking of. And today we're going to speak on the subject of the third great synthesis. So we're going to track the first and second to the third. We are in the midst of the third great synthesis now. And I would like to open with my prayer for America. And here it is. My prayer for America and Americans is that each of us is able to fulfill the vision my ancestors brought with them on the Mayflower 400 years ago. That we are free to live according to our conscience through a direct connection to our highest selves. I pray that we open our hearts and minds to honoring the Native Americans for their role in the birth and evolution of the American mind, spirit, and democracy. I pray that their wisdom continues to inspire us as we bring the true American dream into reality. Liberty, justice, equality, and abundance for all. In God we trust. E pluribus unum, from the many one. And this third great synthesis that we're speaking of is that, would you like to state the third great synthesis?
I will be honored, darling. So this is actually written by Connie before we met. When did you write this roughly?
In the 90s.
Sometime in the 90s. Connie and I met in 2003, coming up on our 17th anniversary. Yeah. And this is Connie Baxter Marlowe. When we come together with the indigenous people of the land as equals, as family, and we each open our hearts and our minds to the other, the melding of our gifts will bring a new perspective that is invisible at this time. This new perspective will allow us to see the path to true unity, peace, and freedom.
Indeed. We're gathered here today to introduce the Bretton Woods Concord Resolution, to evolve our financial system and align ourselves with the natural laws of the abundance of the universe. Stuart has brought together visionaries from the original peoples of this land, philosophers, and technological entrepreneurs who are carrying information and tools to guide the United States of America and humanity into the next step on the evolutionary upward spiral to the higher consciousness needed for the third great synthesis. These times and this event are the playing out of prophecies which long foretold that one day, after a long winter, a spring would come and humanity would awaken to our true nature and the true nature of the universe. And here's a Hopi prophecy.
So here's one of the ancient prophecies that it sounds, if you listen to this, that we might have arrived at that moment. When birds fall from the sky and the animals are dying, a new tribe of people shall come unto the earth from many colors, classes, and creeds, who by their actions and deeds shall make the earth green again. They will be known as the warriors of the rainbow.
So that's us, the warriors of the rainbow. All colors of men coming together now in these times to understand that we are one and to realize the great promise of the United States of America. The American dream is humanity's birthright. And that has to do with what we're addressing here at this conference and this gathering, and that is abundance for all. How do we get there to abundance for all? Well, we align with these natural laws of the universe that Patricia Ann Davis will be bringing in her presentation today, and Stephen Smith from the Ramapo people, and Jeorgina, who brought in that beauty, that heart, that spirit, just to open this entire conference. So when we speak of the birth of the American mind, the first great synthesis, there was the Mayflower Compact that was signed on board a Mayflower, that was brought by the Mayflower Pilgrims and my ancestors to this land. And it was signed in 1621 aboard the Mayflower. It was the first document of democracy.
Actually, 1620.
What did I say, 1621?
Yeah.
Oh, darn.
Uh-huh.
Sorry,
Okay.
1620. November 11th, in fact, a very important day. And that was signed before they landed here. They carried that vision with them on the Mayflower that we could live according to our conscience. And they wrote, drafted this Mayflower Compact that formed them into a civil body politic to enact equal and just laws serving the common good. And then in the spring of 1621, they met with Massasoit, the great sachem of the Wampanoag people, and signed a 6-point mutual protection treaty that said that they would take care of each other. And that treaty was in effect for 54 years and led to this first great synthesis. In the fall of 1621, there was a 3-day harvest celebration that we now call the first Thanksgiving. We're going to read a little something from that from the document that was published in 1622 that speaks of this time of intercultural celebration. So we'll do that.
Would you like me to read that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But one thing, an extraordinary exception to the human condition unfolded when the visionary leaders of two radically different cultures met and worked together to maintain an intercultural exchange that became this first great synthesis between the Europeans and the American Indians during the first 54 years at Plymouth Plantation. This melding gave birth to the American democracy and the American mind and spirit. So I just wanted to, we wanted to read a little something about that. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, that was published. Just to give you an idea, straight from the horse's mouths, so to speak, the people who were there, boots on the ground, recording their experiences. And this can be found in Mort's Relation.
Published in London in 1622. So the English, being obsessive documenters and reporters and journalists, actually kept journals, and these writings were published very much immediately in England because the English were extremely interested in what was about to come. They didn't know what it was, but this incredible adventure that began to unfold on the shores of Massachusetts Bay, Cape Cod. Okay. And this is in fact the only writing we have that describes that event that we now call the first Thanksgiving. Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling, so that we might, after a more special manner, rejoice together, after we had gathered the fruit of our labors. They 4, in one day, killed as much fowl as, with a little help beside, served the company almost a week, at which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming amongst us, and among the rest their greatest king, Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted, and they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it be not always so plentiful as it was at any time, as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God, we are so far from want that we often wish you partakers of our plenty. We have found the Indians very faithful in their covenant of peace with us, very loving and ready to pleasure us. We often go to them and they come to us. Some of us have been 50 miles by land in the country with them. The occasions and relations whereof you shall understand by our general and more full declaration of such things as are worth the noting. Yea, it has pleased God so to possess the Indians with a fear of us and a love unto us, that not only the greatest king amongst them, called Massasoit, but also all the princes and peoples around about us have either made suit unto us, or have been glad on any occasion to make peace with us, so that 7 of them at once have sent their messengers to us to that end. And yea, an isle at sea, which we never saw, hath also, together with the former, yielded willingly to be under the protection and subjects to our sovereign Lord King James, so that there is now great peace among the Indians themselves, which was not formerly, neither would have been, but for us. And we, for our parts, walk as peaceably and safely in the wood as in the highways in England. We entertain them familiarly in our houses, and they as friendly, bestowing their venison on us.
So that gives a little feeling for that time that very few people are aware of, that there was in fact this friendship amongst them that lasted 54 years from that time. And such an important time of coming together of these visionary people so that something new was born, a new mind, a new way of being, a new way of thinking. And what came out of it is the promise of the United States of America. And that promise involves the consent of the governed, self-determination, separation of church and state, equal and just laws serving the common good, liberty, justice, equality, and abundance for all, and in God, Creator, Providence, we trust. And this is a little something from Betty Booth Donahue, who is a Cherokee author of Bradford's Indian book. She's a PhD, and she spoke about the Plymouth paradigm. And she said, Pilgrims and natives were as much alike as they were different. Both groups were highly religious, and they understood the power of the spoken word. The Pilgrims did not arrive with the idea of taking land from the natives. They wanted to buy it, and did. They lived in close proximity to each other. Indians lived inside the stockade and came and went at will. They visited with each other, exchanged ideas and information and goods, and understood each other. Pilgrims viewed the natives as sentient human beings and valued their opinions as much as they feared their savagery. There was a mutual respect. Had other colonies followed Plymouth, things would have been very different for natives and white. Much suffering and loss of life and culture would have been avoided. So that's the first great synthesis. And the second great synthesis was when the Iroquois Great Law aspects of it came into the Constitution. Ben Franklin met with the Iroquois early on, was one of his first assignments to go and meet with them. And that influenced the writing of the Albany Plan. And as things unfolded, the Iroquois were invited to the Continental Congress in 1787. And so this is a little writing that supports that thesis that of the second great synthesis, that the fact that the drafters of the Constitution were open to the advice and influence of the Iroquois, the great law of the Iroquois that had come to them through the peacemaker who had come to them, to the warring tribes of the Iroquois in the 1200s, and brought a new way of seeing, a new way of being to these warring tribes that had been warring for generations. And that new way of seeing brought them to another level where they could see and be an evolved species, which is what we're doing right now. We're approaching this new way of seeing so that we can lift up and out of this debt-based monetary system, this whole way of economics that have driven our behavior for millennia. So here we have a little something written by Donald Grindy and Bruce Johansson in a book called Exemplar of Liberty, Native Americans and the Evolution of Democracy. And it says, on June 11, 1776, while the question of independence was being debated, the visiting Iroquois chiefs were formally invited into the meeting hall of the Continental Congress. There, a speech was delivered in which they were addressed as brothers and told the delegates wish that the friendship between them would continue as long as the sun shall shine and the waters run. The speech also expressed the hope that the new Americans and the Iroquois act as one people and have but one heart. After this speech, an Onondaga chief requested permission to give Hancock an Indian name. The Congress graciously consented, and so the president was renamed Carandawan, or the Great Tree. With the Iroquois chiefs inside the halls of Congress on the eve of American independence, the impact of Iroquois ideas on the founders is unmistakable. History is indebted to Charles Thompson, an adopted Delaware, whose knowledge of and respect for American Indians is reflected in the attention that he gave to this ceremony in the records of the Continental Congress. So that helps people understand that there was this second great synthesis, that the Native Americans have indeed played an important role in the evolution of consciousness. This is how we take the evolution of consciousness of humanity, because the United States is in fact that big step up the evolutionary spiral, that people from all over the world have come to this land to build a better life and realize that promise that America made. So many colonial Americans viewed American society as a synthesis of Native American and European cultures. The Tammany Society, named for a Delaware chief friendly to William Penn, was a classic example of the blending of the two cultures and became a broad-based popular movement that reinforced the founders' usage of symbols and ideological concepts indigenous to North America. This I'm reading from, again, from this exemplar of liberty. When it inherited the patriotic mantle of the Sons of Liberty in Philadelphia, the Tammany Society espoused a philosophy that America was a unique synthesis of the best and noblest aspects of Europe and America. Building upon their own experiences with American Indians, founding fathers like James Madison and Thomas Jefferson used the Tammany Societies and its membership to forge a new Democratic Party after the formation of the United States Constitution. Other founding fathers like Benjamin Franklin and John Dickinson and Benjamin Rush became influential members of the society. So that underscores this synthesis. I hadn't even come across this writing when I called it the second great synthesis, but here, this is a chapter in their book called The American Synthesis. So, and here's a little writing about the natural democracy on the part of Oren Lyons.
In our Iroquois perception, all life is equal, and that includes the birds, animals, things that grow, things that swim. All life is equal in our perception. And that is from Oren Lyons, who is still living, the great Onondaga chief leader.
So we have the indigenous worldview that we're in the process of opening our hearts to this understanding that is in fact our true nature and the true nature of the universe. So this is such an exciting time in this third great synthesis, that we're coming to respect and reverence for all life. We're coming to understand the interrelatedness of all things and actions and the co-creative power of thought, a concern for the future aspects of present action, and living in balance with a concern for the common good, with trust in a higher power, an incorporation of the metaphysical into physical reality, and an honoring of the equality of all aspects of life with sharing and cooperation. Those are the essence of the indigenous worldview that we're coming to now as a result of this pandemic, as a result of the environmental crisis, and all those things that are just encouraging us now to go forward and align with our hearts. And in fact, modern science, breakthrough science, is proving all these aspects that we just spoke of, that we are in fact one consciousness, one entity, and as we access that, we come to align with the sacredness of it all and raise our frequency to a higher frequency where the laws are actually expanded and we actually experience the abundance of the universe. So we'd just like to address an idea of top-line economics. The dominant Western cultures currently base actions and decisions on a model of economics which has the bottom line as its principal determining factor. This profit-based model of a growth-oriented economy in a world of scarce resources, using supply and demand as the invisible hand to regulate and control the outcome, determining profit, success, and the survival in the short term. This Keynesian model might be called bottom line economics. Top line economics takes the highest aspirations of humanity as the dominant features in the interactions between individuals who are in the process of flourishing in a world of abundance. So this top line economics, when we put the principles of trust, generosity, respect, inspiration, love, cooperation, and gratitude as our dominant factors of human interaction in the workplace, at home, and in schools, the resulting allows all aspects of the world to flourish in a manner heretofore unimaginable. So this is what's being addressed here.
And may I mention
Yes.
that Connie's academic training is as an economist, and
Yes.
Top Line Economics is a Connie Baxter Marlowe original.
Yes,
She was too modest to say that, but I'm not.
So that just kind of summarizes what we're about today with Stuart's Concord resolution to lift us up and out of this paradigm based on scarcity, separation. And so we are fortunate to have Stuart lead the charge here. And we just want to honor him and honor the Native people who've come here to participate in this evolution of our monetary system and our thinking and our way of being.
Our beings. Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, we have a little, thank you, Andrew and Connie. Thank you, Connie and Andrew. We have a little bit of time for some comments, questions. I want to say that I think the best ideas are in the air. My best thoughts are living in others. I've been speaking of the top line for many a year. I speak about the balance between principle, AL, and principles, bottom and top line. So you are indeed a sister, Connie. Thank you very much for what you both have shared. Let's take some time for responses. Connie and Andrew brought forward a very provocative theme, and that is that it's not quite black and white. And I want to invite Patricia, if she cares to first offer a response to this thesis that's been presented to the first, the second, and now the third synthesis. And Patricia will be the next speaker after we pause from 10 to 10:30 Eastern time. Patricia, do you wish to make any comments? And if so, you need to come off mute. Good. To what you and Connie have offered.
Well, thank you for this time, Stuart, and thank you, Connie. Thank you for your work. It's really detailed in history that we don't learn in our schools and history books. So I'm fascinated with how this development came about in such a way that it does reveal, it does encourage peacemaking among people. And that is really what is in our tribal language worldview. And to hear it in English and to hear it in an academic sense, so to speak, from the inquiry that you have done, the extensive inquiry that you have done. It's very healing because we're in a world that wants to use words like fight and combat everything. And we must change our language accordingly to become friends, to stop enemy creation, to build together. This community must include the cross-cultural lens. It must include the intergenerational. It must include the value of human beings, the value of humane beings, the value of all cultures and languages, which we are just embarking on today in terms of reminding people. I have a lot to say, but mostly I want to say that there is no healing in blaming, and healing is for everyone. And so I'm inspired and encouraged to ask other people to join us, not only in this Bretton Woods Global Summit, but to see it as the beginning to initiate our footsteps forward in following the laws of peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. So friends, we have about 9 more minutes. Does anybody else have any comments on what Connie and Andrew have brought forward that really leads into this work here, contribution to the third great synthesis that will be unfolding today and that has really unfolded with our Native American, speaking as a boat person, my Native American brothers and sisters, many, 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 as well as African Americans. There are over 150 inaugurators, that is, people who've been part of these gatherings. Many Native American, many African American who've blessed the work. So this is something of a synthesis, perhaps a third great synthesis. Other comments, friends, to what Connie and Andrew have offered? If people are on mute, you need to come off. Bill, I see you. Any comments you wish to offer?
Oh, hello. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Connie and Andrew, for your presentation. It's always good to see you and hear the evolution of thought and be a part of the community. It's wonderful. So what's coming to mind today, I'm thinking about the two-row wampum treaty, which in my mind is still very much in effect. And so I'm wondering if that's going to be a part of our conversation today, if I'm looking forward to hearing how this fits into the two-row wampum treaty. And because there are many overlays, many agreements and understandings and overlays, but one long-standing agreement is that two-row wampum treaty goes way back, and it precedes the time of the Pilgrim landing, and it precedes the time of at least one of the syntheses, and now 2 of the syntheses, and I can't quite remember the timing, if it precedes the initial one, or if it's a part of that. That's kind of my curiosity. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I could express something there, Bill.
Okay, thanks.
The two-row wampum treaty is from New York, and it took place on the Hudson River, and it was about 2 rows, 2 ships. One was European boat and one was a native mode of transport on the river, proceeding together in the same direction. And it was, I don't know the date, but it was long, long, long after the arrival of the Mayflower. And I think it was after in other words, the Dutch, we all know the Dutch were the original settlers of that part of the Lenape territory. And the Truro Wampum Treaty, I think, was among or between the English as opposed to the Dutch. I'm still learning about this, Bill, but it definitely was not the evolution of culture that occurred that I'm personally very knowledgeable about, is that which took place up in the true Northeast. This is slightly different. I've only recently become aware of the Truro, but in fact, it is much later, and I believe it's after the English displaced the Dutch from Manhattan and pretty much took over New York, and then crafted this treaty with the native people, the English. So that's my belief. I could be wrong. Do you think so, Pam?
Well, I'm looking it up. It was 1613.
Oh.
So it was before.
It was between the Dutch. You see, the Dutch had said, by that time, the Dutch had settled New York.
Yeah, so it was 1613 between representatives of the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee and representatives of the Dutch government.
So it's a Dutch, yeah.
Which in what is now upstate New York.
Okay, so you forgive my ignorance. I really want to learn a lot more about this. So I knew that it was not directly, and you could say, okay, 1613, it was the coming of those Europeans the Dutch, who settled what is present-day New York.
And the 3 rows of the white beads symbolize peace, friendship, and respect. Separate the 2 purple rows. The 2 purple rows symbolize 2 paths or 2 vessels traveling down the same river. 1 row symbolizes the Haudenosaunee people with their law and customs, while the other row symbolizes European laws and customs. So that's the Truro Treaty in a brief look at it.
Okay, thanks.
Of 1613.
Uh-huh. So before the Mayflower, indeed. Right, but the Dutch had settled well before the Mayflower arrived.
So it was in that same time period of the settlement of New York, New England, etc.
And that treaty is still celebrated to this day, and the polishing of the chain and all of those things are part of that, aren't the chain of friendship?
Yeah, the chain of friendship is the Canandaigua Treaty that was signed with George Washington, Pickering, George Washington's representative, and when was that? 1754
That's
or something.
Way later, and I was thinking, see, maybe for that reason, I was thinking that this was 100 years, 150 years later, which the Canandaigua Treaty was.
It was indeed.
Yeah, right.
So you were just a little confused. But that's not our area of expertise. It would be great if Kevin Deere were here.
Right. Yeah.
What's his name? The other guy that does all that.
Maybe Daryl Pronovost.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe it's Daryl Pronovost.
Yeah, but Kevin Deere is very knowledgeable as well.
Yes.
So friends, we have a couple of more minutes.
Thank you.
I want to honor the schedule so that we can have some breath in between. Any more comments on what Connie and Andrew shared in the last few minutes? And we'll pause till 10:30 Eastern time, and then Patricia will speak to a very important aspect of the work. Any final comments?
Well, I have, if nobody has a comment, I have a comment on Patricia's work that's so important. And I look forward to hearing from her, because she has a method for us to come together and move forward. So she has a process, a ceremonial, indigenous, how does it go, Patricia? Indigenous ceremonial change process. That's it. And so I look forward to that. And
that's right.
It's wonderful work you do, Patricia.
I'm ready.
Okay, so.
And I thank you, Andrew, too, for reminding us that it's cooperation and collaboration that we must focus on and move forward with.
And your
So
process.
I'd like to ask, if I may, before we pause for half an hour, and then Patricia will pick up the thread. I'd like to ask Connie if you would read the passage by the woman, part of it again, so we can hear these words, the author, maybe just a paragraph or two, so we can leave with her revelations in mind. We can pause after that if you'd be willing.
Just have to find that.
Betty Booth Donahue.
Betty Booth Donahue. Mm-hmm.
Is that who you're speaking? That we.
If you would be so good.
Yep.
The Cherokee scholar.
So she calls it the Plymouth paradigm. And we interviewed her, we're friends with her. We sought her out because she wrote this book called Bradford's Indian Book, where she shows in an intellectual manner, scholarly manner, the influence of the Native American thought process on William Bradford and his authorship of the On Plymouth Plantation, which is in fact the first document or
first book published.
It's the first literature.
Right.
It's what it's called. If you look in a book of American literature, the first piece of American literature is of Plymouth Plantation.
By William Bradford.
By William Bradford, your ancestor, dear Stuart.
Oh, and Betty Booth Donahue is in fact a linguist, so it was a linguistic academic analysis of the book and showing the native influence on language as well.
Yeah. So here's what she said in her interview, and we have it on YouTube. You can go and find it on our YouTube channel,
right,
which is YouTube the first 50 years, first 50 years. And here it is. Pilgrims and natives were as much alike as they were different. Both groups were highly religious and they understood the power of the spoken word. The Pilgrims did not arrive with the idea of taking land from natives. They wanted to buy it and did. They lived in close proximity to each other. Indians lived inside the stockade and came and went at will. This is being proven now by archaeological digs. So it's very important that this isn't just theory. It's actually proven by artifacts that are being discovered in Plymouth. They visited with each other, exchanged ideas and information and goods, and understood each other. That's the important piece. They understood each other because it's a common humanity that they shared, and they saw that and felt that. The Pilgrims viewed the natives as sentient human beings and valued their opinions as much as they feared their savagery. We all have our savage aspects, so there's no saying the Europeans weren't savage in their way, for sure. There was mutual respect. Had other colonies followed Plymouth, things would have been very different for natives and whites. Much suffering and loss of life and culture would have been avoided. So she feels that the Plymouth paradigm, if that had prevailed, we would be in a different position. But from my perspective, everything has its purpose, has its way, and we are in this process for a reason and leading to something we can't even fathom.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Connie and Andrew, thank you very much. Our circle grows on earth. I do believe there are many with us in the spirit as we do this deed and plant this seed. So my heartfelt thanks to you both. Friends, we pause and we'll continue in a half an hour with Patricia Ann Davis, loving peacemaker, who will be talking about the framework for our work, which is the Bretton Woods Global Working Circles in the different professions, and what they in turn would serve, which is a universal model through sister cities, sister relationships, for economic and cultural renewal. So you'll be hearing me with each of these presentations repeating this refrain, and that is, our task today is to plant a seed in the granite soil of the Northern Kingdom of New Hampshire, here specifically at Bretton Woods. And that seed is in the form of the first 21st century Bretton Woods Accord, which is the Bretton Woods Concord Resolution. This brings us to our speaker today. And our task, as I've mentioned, is the 20th century Bretton Woods Accords, which established our World Bank and International Monetary Fund, globalized our debt-based monetary system. And as I also mentioned, debt brings with it poverty, brings with it despair, brings with it struggle, brings with it war, brings death, brings ruin, and brings misery. So our task, they said, is to bring a redemptive impulse. Simple, modest, a seed as modest as a seed itself, but a deed that we can do together. Patricia Ann Davis, loving peacemaker of the Choctaw Diné Nation, Diné, also known as the Navajo Nation, is an international educator, an author, and one who's devoted her life to the question of peacemaking. She's given us a great gift to the work as part of the third great synthesis we've been discussing by offering a template for our Bretton Woods global working circles in all of the professions. So I'm going to ask her to devote a fair bit of her time to taking us through the template, ourselves and through us, those with whom we're connected. But if you wanted Patricia to begin by speaking to your understanding of the working circles in the range of professions and what they themselves would fashion through sister community, sister city relationships, which is this universal model for economic and cultural renewal in the spirit of the last will become the first. Because although the Bretton Woods Mount Washington Hotel is a resplendent site, it is an island in the midst of one of the poorest counties in our nation, counties that have suffered from our debt-based monetary system. That's not said in the spirit of critique. It's said trying to speak the truth in love. So welcome, Patricia. Thank you for all you brought. Thank you for the collaboration. Thank you for being one of the pillars of this third great synthesis with others as well.
I'm very happy and honored. And for clarification, the details on the Indigenous ceremonial change process, was that later today? I have a prepared narrative this morning, and we can expand and elaborate and also ask and answer questions.
So Patricia,
I can begin and then we can.
It was envisioned that you would speak to the ceremonial change process in this session, although we will make reference to it at 3 o'clock in the plenum. But it was envisioned that you would speak to that, the working circles and the universal model in this session.
I would like to read my prepared narrative, and it does include a description of the Indigenous ceremonial change process.
Wonderful.
All of my relatives, all of you, all of my relatives, Ya'ate Abena, good morning and a blessed welcome to the Bretton Woods Global Summit, a heartwarming gathering to affirm a human world community. We will realize our potentialities in worldwide peace for our collective survival. We must have such an intention. Therefore, we begin by acknowledging the original Indigenous people of Turtle Island and in the tribal territories of the Eastern Shorelands. Gratitude for our collective spiritual identities spoken in our language and our cultural lifeways. Our original teaching as stewards of the earth, water, fire, and air are in a crisis state of conflict of interest with exploitive and extractive privatization and ownership and profit. Therefore, the Indigenous ceremonial change process template is the sequencing format for designing co-creative solutions. A reminder, people don't know this, but we all need to know this. We're all indigenous to the four sacred elements, the earth, the water, the fire, and the air, our physical, emotive, mental, and spiritual, respectively. Our collective socio-economic planetary wellness restoration requires a reconnection to nature and to teach others within. We need to not only feel and understand and teach others that within the balance and harmony of the natural order laws that govern all of us equally, these four sacred elements are actually our body. The earth is our body. The water is our emotive, that is maladaptive emotions, as well as reframing them, cleansing, purifying into the authentic feelings of love, joy, happiness. And then there is the mental. Actually, fire is temperature, but it is also our intellect, our sacred self-intellect. And then there is the air, which is also in the environment. So we're existing simultaneously within also the environmental earth, water, fire, and air. And we cannot be existing outside of and separate from it. This is very important because those who believe and think that they are existing outside of and separate from it are destroying it. And that is what needs to be changed in our thinking. So our collective socioeconomic planetary wellness restoration requires, at this time especially, a reconnection to nature and to each other within the balance and harmony of the natural order laws that govern all of us equally. The Bretton Woods Concord Resolution, which is the first 21st century Bretton Woods Accord document that intends to reframe to restore, and to manifest win-win, constructive, and life-affirming decisions and intergenerational outcomes. We can no longer afford to recruit our next generation of youth to participate in their own demise by perpetuating win-lose, where no one wins, destructive and death-producing decisions and outcomes. Thus, we graciously invite each of you to do your part to inspire and motivate others, motivate them to discover their inherent genius gift, and they too can give their genius gift to constructive and life-affirming service in the world, in each of your professional domains. And so it does require group consensus for designing safe and supportive environments in order to realize our potentialities as humane beings, choosing harmlessness and peace within and around us. The intention of this summit is to initiate and to facilitate a mega planetary systemic reframe to end the bondage and the slavery of the unequal distribution of wealth, where it is robbed from the poor to enrich a few. Every generation. It is actually a simple yes or no values clarification question. Let us choose wisely, and let us choose with our collective conscience. And so the Indigenous ceremonial change process is the template and the format. It's a sequencing for the Bretton Woods working circles. There are the domains in government, in education, in health, in the monetary system, in the social, in the economic, in the financial systems. These domains are based on a destructive and death-producing choices. So the sequencing is common sense. Think about it. We first must name something that's out of balance, and that's exactly what we have done here. That the monetary system is debt-based, and that means that the outcome is a lack of, when in fact we can affirm abundance, because scarcity is a call for abundance. And when we name what is out of balance in terms of our definition of money, and there is a conflict of interest in our definition, so there's a confusion and there's a fraud, there's a misunderstanding in which people use power over, and we are not using our own power within to have power with others to eliminate that need for power over, which is conquest and plunder and even genocide, pillaging. We're at this place where we can choose differently. And so the working circles will first identify what is it in each domain, what is it that's out of balance, what is it in our governing systems that's out of balance. That is a way of reflecting, reviewing, and understanding, researching, inquiry into what is the root cause. Only when we undo, cleanse, purify, when we understand the root cause, where we are willing to make correction to that root cause, only then can we undo the symptoms of all the out of balance conditions. For example, in our government, it is adversarial. And the root cause is that we use the words combat poverty, combat drugs, fight. Politicians are going to fight for us. We're going to fight each other for something that we value and cherish, and yet it leads to destruction and death and suffering. So the first phase of this template, naming the out of balance condition and identifying the root cause. This sequencing follows in such a way that it unifies people and it eliminates just outright confrontation or attack or debate. Because when we polarize into adversary and for and against and right and wrong and good and bad, then we are perpetuating the war within us, and we're projecting that outward. And so undoing the root cause then eliminates over time all of the symptoms. Then we move to the second phase, which is correction, undoing that root cause. It's very simple, and yet people are really in denial and also in defiance of making corrections within themselves, because change takes place within ourselves outward. Change does not happen from the outside in. Change happens with changing our thinking, and then we can move forward in our intention, in our action plan. There are only two intentions, and we know that, and yet we're still choosing destructive. And when in fact constructive means building. How do we build community? We build community by peacemaking. We live peace. We live in peace in community building. These are principles from the language and culture of Indigenous people worldwide, and especially the tribal nations within this country, and even more especially from within the nations that I originate from, because this template is translated, it is simplified, and it is a way of describing, to convey that concept to youth in order for them to be clear. There's no confusion, there's no complexity, there's no doubt. It's not hard, this yes and no decision. So it takes self-reflection, it takes self-inventory, it takes examining our unexamined assumptions about why it is that we value and cherish destruction, war, and suffering, that we think that a spiritual path and way of life is pain and suffering, or that lack and not worthy is going to earn us a reward. It's going to bring us good. All of these ways that we tell our body wrong thinking with our criminal mind, I say criminal mind is using our thinking for what it is not for. Using our thinking from the sacred self-intellect is using our thinking for what it is for. And that is the unifying principles that are, this is an unprecedented summit. We're coming with solution. This will be described by the various speakers later today. And so this planting of a seed to bring to fruition is already existing in the laws that govern us equally. It's only requiring us to align with these laws in the natural order that govern us. We have been out of balance and out of harmony with nature and the laws in nature that govern us equally. So I'm talking about what is cross-cultural, what is intergenerational, what is inclusive, and also what can be translated into any language in any land. We ask you to listen and to carefully evaluate your own ways that you have chosen not to collaborate, not to cooperate. And we're reminded today by the speakers that we are capable. We're all expressing our own indigenous connections to our inherent sovereignty, to our own genius gift. And so the sequencing in which we use this gift, we move into a reframe that is, oh, I get it. Aha, I understand. Yes, there is no fight. There is no reason to do enemy creation in such a way that we will be in self-betrayal, self-negation, self-effacement, self-destruction, because we have to realize and understand what is good for us. That doesn't sound like and doesn't feel like to any of us in this crisis times everywhere. It does not feel good. It is not good for us. And we all know that. We know that in our core. And I hope that you hear in my voice that I am doing my part. I'm doing my part because it has been given to me by my late father to create opportunities to inspire and motivate people to remember, to reawaken, to echozen. That's our conscience using moral reasoning. That's our holy thinking from our sacred self. And this is the appropriate function of our whole brain thinking that we must use in order to activate our co-creative imagination. The co-creative imagination is where we have within ourselves the capacity to design the eloquent solution. The ceremony, Jeorgina, inspires us and literally translates to living the loving way as a way of life. So let us affirm our collective survival between Mother Earth and Father Sky, where all humane beings are holy earth surface people. And we're all traveling together on what we, the people, call the four corn pollen footsteps within our natural order laws. Diyan Nahuk Dane, that's holy earth surface people. So in the spirit of Hojo, which is the all-encompassing concept of holiness with H and wholeness with W, there are no competing collectivities representing competing ideologies. This Bretton Woods Global Summit is affirming, intending, affirming, and instituting and manifesting each of us in our domain, in the working circles. A working circle means that we're going to follow the sequencing of naming the out of balance condition, of identifying the root cause, of undoing and correcting the root cause in order to eliminate the symptoms. The reframe then is to restore our thinking to our whole brain thinking, to our creative imagination. That's what we have been given. I hope I'm getting this across, that the creative imagination is where we use our intention to tell our body correct information. And then we can have a safe and supportive environment in which we design the co-creative solutions together. And then the practical applications. All of these deep details are on the agenda. They will be speakers later today, and each one of them will follow this sequencing in such a way that they are bringing us in this summit to those exact co-creative solutions in our action plans on how to manifest them. We're not just talking about and talking about and talking about and talking about. We have very gifted and talented people who know and understand, who have also spent their lifetime. They have also spent their professional knowledge to serve and to inform others, to teach others. We're using peer education, and that's an exponential way to get this across. It's called critical mass. That means that enough people will awaken and will remember. Therefore, I'm asking each and every one of you to do your part, and we will continue on this path to a restoration, a wellness restoration of a monetary, to get us out of the debt-based monetary system. And so I turn it back over to you, Stuart. If there are questions, let us answer those questions.
Thank you, Patricia, very much. One who's working while you're working while you're working. Thank you for what you prepared. Thank you what you've offered from your heart and from your mind. I would like to just broaden the framework a little bit and then invite any comments. So the way we envision, friends, this is really a new epoch we're entering into, I would say. This is the conclusion of the 75th anniversary commemoration, commemoration of the Bretton Woods Accords, which established the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, as you've heard and will be hearing from me more, that globalized our debt-based monetary system. So we're inaugurating in a modest way, a seed-like way, a new era. The framework for our work are the working circles. The working circles are open to any individuals who grasp the vision and who wish to work. And it's noted on our website under, that is brettonwoods.us, under working circles. Wish to work with a remarkable breadth of colleagues. Collaboration probably that would have been most unique in your lives, given the breadth and given the richness and given the representation. So these colleagues, and Patricia, maybe if you could read, if you'd be so willing to read the 12 points so that folks that are on our website under working circles, so that folks who would join such a working circle, be it education, technology, religion, public service, finance, monetary policy, you name it, that they would then work together to come really to the heart in their profession of the problems, challenges, opportunities that can lead to the fulfillment of the chairman of the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, Morgenthau, who said, the aim of the conference is for the citizens of the world to achieve their full potentialities in peace. So our framework is the working circles. And the working circles, as Patricia, if she's willing, would outline in the 12 points, would come up with solutions.
Yes.
How the different professions can contribute to the peoples of the world achieving their full potentialities in peace. And together, collectively, these solutions are what we call the 21st century Bretton Woods Accords, beginning with the Bretton Woods Concord Resolution in the field of monetary policy, would then together weave like a tapestry of fabric, weave into a universal model for economic and cultural renewal, with each of the professions weaving a strand. And through sister cities and sister communities, this model will be conveyed, we hope, from Bretton Woods, where our debt-based monetary system originated, conveyed around the world. So that's what's unfolded from our work. And Patricia, if it makes sense to you, do you want to go over those 12 points and within the context of education so that those that are listening themselves can know how they might be able to get involved? And if they know of others, I trust, who can grasp the vision, that they could communicate it to them.
Yes. Under the title, these are the distinguishing elements, and we're inspired by Henry David Thoreau. Interesting that I grew up in a community that was named after Thoreau, and it was on the Navajo reservation, and we call it L'Yaja, which means the baby prairie dog town. Henry David Thoreau said, to act collectively is according to the spirit of our institutions. Thus, the distinguishing elements of the Bretton Woods global working circles are: 1, the working circles focus on what we suggest is the central problem, the challenge, the opportunity of our time. In Morgenthau's words, the creation of a dynamic world community in which the peoples of every nation will be able to realize their potentialities in peace. 2, the working circles, recognition of, if not the root cause behind the failure to date, to create the dynamic world community spoken of. That root cause, we suggest, is our view of the world that focuses on what divides us as distinct from what aspires to unite us, humankind. The Bretton Woods Concord resolution traces this division right down into our monetary policy, our dealings with money. 3, the working circles work out of the understanding that this division, as all divisions, begins with the way we think about the world. Accordingly, the working circles are seed beds for the cultivation of the new kind of thinking that Einstein calls for, essential aspects of which are native to the original people of this land. Such a renowned thinking will be required if we are to address the deep divisions that have arisen. Simply expressed, the thinking referred to arises out of the transformation of rationalism and relationalism. Such a thinking can be referred to as an enlightened common sense,
Excuse me, Patricia.
a shared sense of what would relate.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, just say the evolution of rationalism into relationalism. Sorry.
Yes, I will repeat. If we are to address the deep divisions that have arisen, such a renewed thinking will be required. And simply expressed, the thinking referred to arises out of the transformation of rationalism into, this is the reframe process, into relationalism. Let me repeat that. It's out of rationalism into relationalism. Such a thinking can be referred to as an enlightened common sense, a shared sense of what would relate and unite us, humankind. 4, the working circles are accordingly distinguished by their rich diversity along lines of race, ethnicity, gender, age, socioeconomic, and professional backgrounds. That embraces the breadth of perspectives and offers an unprecedented collaborative environment for designing creative solutions that engage the problems, the challenges, and the opportunities before us. 5, the circles are working with a format, a deliberative, ceremonial, co-creative change process that is not only indigenous to this land, but universal in its applications and unprecedented in its possibilities. I'd like to emphasize the word unprecedented in its possibilities. The change process both recognizes and moves beyond the divisive, dualistic thinking, which otherwise all too often undermines our deliberations and facilitates instead co-design, co-creative solutions. Such solutions are preeminently win-win, life-affirming, and thereby, as noted, unprecedented in their potential to bring forth the change that humankind seeks. 6, finally, what distinguishes the Bretton Woods Global Working Circles is Bretton Woods itself, one of the most universally recognized brands of our day. Bretton Woods has been and remains a center stage platform recognized the world over. And of course, that is because of its historical significance and the reason and purpose of why we are participating in this summit today.
Thank you, Patricia. And can you take us through?
The working.
So go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The working circles template.
Good.
The following template is presented here for the Bretton Woods Global Working Circle in education. And I would make a distinction that there is education and schooling, and that can be talked about in a little bit more detail if people wish and if there is a question about it. The same steps can be applied to the other working circles. The steps enable the working circle participants in person or online to arrive at ready consensus in terms of designing solutions, whereby education in this instance can contribute, as noted, to, quote, the creation of a dynamic world community in which the peoples of every nation will be able to realize their potentialities in peace, end of quote. 1, a welcoming word. This is the process and the sequencing here. 1, a welcoming word. 2, introductions. Your name, your work, where you are located. Further biographical information will be visible on the conference platform. 3, what aspects of our educational system do you identify as in the most need of our collective efforts toward change?
Well, Patricia, can you give a couple of examples? Can you give a couple of examples from your own experience of point number 3, so this can be as concrete as possible for the listeners? A couple of examples in your own career as an educator.
What aspects of our educational system do you identify in most need of our collective efforts towards change? Yes, I did mention cross-cultural and intergenerational. Cross-cultural means that rather than devalue or dehumanize others in enemy creation, that we take an interest in learning other languages and cultures. That is really the definition of the word assimilation. That means when two cultures, as Connie described to us at the first meeting of the indigenous with the European, during European contact, that they shared meals and they shared food, they shared their resources. So they were communicating and relating in a way of in a way that they were cooperating and collaborative. That's assimilation. But when there's one up and one down, that means that there's domination and submission. Then that is acculturation. So in acculturation, our schooling system is to the dominant, quote, the dominant societies, what we call the Western body of knowledge and value system, and only the history that glorifies conquest. And then that body of knowledge does not include other people's way of life, to the extent that we stop destroying each other. So that's one, the distinction between assimilation and acculturation. And then having learned the language of psychology to a doctorate in clinical psychology, although I didn't finish that degree program, I know from my life's work that we already have the creative imagination intact at 2 years old. And the school system then socially engineers and socially conditions most of that creativity out of us through 12 years of rote learning, of memorization. And then we have 12 years of that, just
Thank you,
memorization. And we have 4 years of bachelor's.
We could spend much time on that. I do want to.
So we have interpret.
I do want to get through the last
right,
step.
That's what I had planned for this.
Great, good, thank you.
That's what I had planned for this afternoon. And so that's another example. So I gave you 2 examples. I was waiting for this afternoon for some of these details. So if that's enough of examples, I'll move on to 4, which is prioritize the top 3 aspects for more in-depth considerations, which we are doing exactly right now. Number 5, what is the root cause behind each of these 3 identifies aspects. 6, how do you propose undoing and dismantling the root cause? Remember, the Indigenous ceremonial change process is a how-to. That's what makes it very different. Number 7, what creative solutions can contribute toward creating a future worth envisioning for our youth and the generations to come? Please note, the focus is on systemic change, not merely coping. 8, how can these solutions be best introduced into the educational system? Or I would say the schooling system, the academic schooling system. 9, what is the first step that each of us can take in the implementation? 10, reflections. 11, what are the next steps? And meeting dates. 12, concluding word. Anything left out? Anything, questions, clarification, and clarifications.
Wonderful, wonderful.
This is the working circles template.
Wonderful. Patricia, thank you. Let's invite some comments.
And yes, just want to say, remember, I am calling in from an Indian reservation from where I grew up. There are extreme challenges, and I'm just pleased to be a part of this process.
Wonderful. So Patricia, what we're looking forward to you doing at 3 o'clock is to offering your thoughts as a representative of the original peoples of this land of the Bretton Woods Concord Resolution. At the end of that, I'd like to ask you to speak to the working circles, because it is a fruit, an informal fruit of one of our working circles. But the main thing is for you to speak as a representative of the original peoples of this land, along with Owl and Johnny Ford of the African American peoples of this land, to this redemptive impulse. Again, at the end, I'd then like you to see some more general words about the working circle. But let's invite comments to what Patricia has just shared. The point being, friends, that you all are invited to join one of the working circles in your areas. The template for each, the proposed template for each, we've just heard these 12 points. What characterizes, if not distinguishes, I believe, the working circles, Patricia read first. So let's invite any comments. I see Connie, you're there. Do you have any?
Yes, I'm just thrilled with Patricia's work and her application, her bridge work from the indigenous mind to the Western mind, which is so important because it is our fundamental assumptions, our worldview that dictates our behavior. And the indigenous peoples have a radically different worldview from the Western European mindset. And I think for her to approach the educational system, what she's calling the schooling system, I love the fact that she's discerning between education and schooling. I mean, this is a core issue for shifting our reality, is to go for our inner knowing, expanding on our inner knowing, our direct connection to the divine, to all that is, that's intrinsic in the indigenous way of life and knowledge. And we've been subject to a scientific paradigm that has disconnected us from that knowing that we know and we have within us, but we've been part of this scientific paradigm that said it's a mechanistic universe, we're separate from it, we just can use everything and fix things in parts and separate them all and just make a mess of things. And so now she's able, with her education, to bridge her upbringing and her knowledge and her connection to that Western mind and describe it in ways that can help us move into a holistic understanding of the nature of the universe and our place within it. And fortunately, modern physics is breakthrough physics right now, unified physics and Nassim Haramein with resonance science and others, Jude Currivan and others are proving this scientifically. So the Western mind can make that leap and say, oh, okay, science is proving it. So now I can go there. I have permission from science to go there. So it's just so exciting, Stuart, that you have brought Patricia forth. You've nurtured her and brought her forth into this Bretton Woods initiative, so that, and now you're taking this step into the practical application. You're not just leaving it in theory and all that. You're really putting her knowledge to work in this process so that we have practical means of accessing and applying this information and our own hearts knowing that we're connecting to now. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you. Friends, we have about 4 minutes. Any other comments on what Patricia's offered?
So this is Bill Conradi. How Matakiapi. Greetings to you from Dakota country. I'm excited to be in this conference, and I'm so excited to see Patricia Ann Davis here, and thrilled to see you here again. I recall the work that you'd done in another conference where daily your work was used to reflect back on the community, the Bretton Woods community itself. And the diagnostics was happening and the adjustments were being made. And I think there's been a few months past since then. I think I see significant cultural changes within the Bretton Woods culture because of your continued efforts and willingness to share your brilliance and your wisdom. And I think the Bretton Woods culture is becoming more culturally competent because of your offerings. And so I'm extremely grateful that you were able to make it to this, and your part that you play in the Center for American Studies. And I think it's a fabulous collaboration. So I'm excited to be here and witness this and see continued, I think, healthy changes. And so I'm gushing a little bit, but I needed to gush because of my enthusiasm for you and the work that's being done. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the Center for American Studies.
And thank you, Bill. You're making this all possible. So friends, we come to the end of this session.